Did you know that in the late 2010s, there were actual clown sightings that caused panic across various states in the US? Some people even reported being chased by clowns in the woods. Clown horror stories have always fascinated us, and at the same time, instill a deep sense of fear within us. There's something about those bright red noses, painted-on smiles, and oversized shoes that sends shivers down our spines. Today, I'll be sharing two terrifying tales that will make you question whether clowns are truly as harmless as they seem. One of these stories is true, while the other is a work of fiction, but both will have you sleeping with the lights on tonight. From serial killers to haunted circuses, the world of clown horror is vast and terrifying. As we dive into these two stories, you'll realize that it's not just the clowns themselves that are scary, but the psychological impact they have on our minds. So, if you're ready to face your fears and confront the terror that lurks beneath the painted-on smile, then let's get started. As we explore these two stories, ask yourself, what is it about clowns that makes them so unsettling? Is it their unpredictability, their exaggerated features, or something more sinister? The answer, much like the truth behind these two stories, lies within. It's time to embark on this journey into the heart of clown horror, and I promise you, it's going to be a wild ride. Story 1. John Wayne Gacy, the killer behind the clown mask. John Wayne Gacy, one of America's most notorious serial killers, embodied a chilling duality that would haunt the nation's collective consciousness for decades to come. Behind his carefully constructed facade of respectability lay one of the most prolific murderers in U.S. history, responsible for the deaths of 33 young men and boys during the 1970s. Born in Chicago in 1942, Gacy's early life was marked by a complex relationship with his alcoholic father, who physically abused him and routinely belittled his interests and achievements. Despite these challenges, Gacy grew into an outwardly successful adult. He established himself as a prominent figure in his community, running a successful construction business, PDM contractors, and becoming actively involved in local politics and community organizations. Gacy's alter ego, Pogo the Clown, emerged as part of his involvement with the Jolly Joker Clown Club, where he volunteered performing at children's hospitals and charitable events. His clown persona featured distinctive makeup with sharp-angled eyebrows and a red-tipped nose. While many found him charming in this role, the contrast between his public face and private actions would later make his crimes seem all the more horrifying. The development of his clown character coincided with the escalation of his criminal behavior. Gacy had a previous conviction in Iowa for sodomy in 1968, serving 18 months of a 10-year sentence before being released on parole. After returning to Chicago, he worked hard to rebuild his reputation, but his violent impulses remained unchecked. Between 1972 and 1978, he embarked on a killing spree that would claim the lives of dozens of young men and teenagers. His victims were typically lured to his house at 8213 West Somerdale Avenue in Norwood Park Township with promises of construction work through his business. Many were vulnerable young men seeking employment or hitchhikers he encountered. Once inside his home, Gacy would usually ply them with alcohol, then overpower them. His preferred method of murder was strangulation with a tourniquet, a technique that allowed him to prolong his victims' suffering. The juxtaposition between Gacy's public and private lives became increasingly pronounced during this period. While he was committing these horrific murders, he continued to perform as Pogo at community events and children's parties. He became known for saying that a clown can get away with anything, a statement that would later take on sinister implications. His house became a macabre gallery of clown-themed artwork, much of it created by Gacy himself, including self-portraits in his clown costume. What made Gacy's crimes particularly disturbing was his method of disposal. 26 of his victims were buried in the crawl space beneath his house, while others were disposed of in nearby rivers when the space became full. He developed an elaborate system of lime disposal to manage the decomposition odors, and even enlisted unwitting employees from his construction business to dig trenches in his crawl space, claiming they were for drainage purposes. The investigation that led to Gacy's arrest began with the disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Piest in December 1978. Piest had last been seen at the pharmacy where he worked, telling his mother he was going to discuss a potential construction job with Gacy. This disappearance finally gave investigators the break they needed to connect the dots between numerous missing persons cases in the area. During the initial investigation, police were struck by the overwhelming smell of decomposition in Gacy's house, despite his elaborate efforts to mask it. As they built their case, they discovered that Gacy had a history of sexual assault complaints and that several young men had reported escaping from violent encounters with him. When confronted with mounting evidence, Gacy finally confessed, famously telling investigators that he had committed all the murders while another personality took control, referring to this alter ego as Jack Hanley. The excavation of Gacy's property in December 1978 and January 1979 revealed the true horror of his crimes. The crawl space yielded body after body, many in advanced states of decomposition. The recovery operation was traumatic for even the most seasoned investigators, with many requiring counseling afterward. The process of identifying the victims would continue for decades, with some remains only being identified in recent years through advances in DNA testing. During his trial in 1980, Gacy's defense attempted to enter an insanity plea, arguing that he suffered from multiple personality disorder. However, the jury rejected this defense, finding him guilty of all 33 murders on March 13, 1980. He was sentenced to death for his crimes and spent 14 years on death row at Menard Correctional Center, during which time he continued to paint clown pictures and gave numerous interviews maintaining his innocence despite his earlier confessions. Gacy was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994, his final words reportedly being, "Kiss my ass." His case stands as one of the most disturbing examples of how a seemingly respectable community member could harbor such darkness, and how the cheerful facade of a clown could mask unimaginable evil. The case contributed significantly to the cultural phenomenon of coulrophobia, the fear of clowns, and remains one of the most studied cases in American criminal history. Gacy's case is a chilling reminder that monsters can come in many forms, and sometimes the most terrifying ones are those who hide behind a mask of innocence. As we move on to our next story, ask yourself, what's the true horror behind the concept of clowns? Is it the fear of being stalked and killed, or is it something deeper, something that speaks to our primal fears? Story 2. The Legend of Giggles, Ravenswood's Dark Carnival Tale. The legend of Giggles has haunted the small town of Ravenswood, Michigan since the tragic events of October 31, 1963. What began as local folklore has grown into one of America's most enduring carnival ghost stories, documented in numerous paranormal investigations and written about in several true crime books, including Martin Blackwood's American Carnival Hauntings, 1985, and Sarah Mitchell's The Ravenswood Incident, 1992. The story centers around Marcus Marty Sullivan, known professionally as Giggles the Clown, who worked at the once famous Ravenswood Carnival and Fun Fair from 1958 to 1963. Sullivan, born in 1932 in nearby Detroit, had been a fixture at the carnival since its golden age in the late 1950s, remembered by locals for his signature orange wig and unique makeup design featuring elongated teardrops beneath his eyes. According to carnival records and eyewitness accounts from former employees, the incident occurred during the carnival's annual Halloween spooktacular. On that fateful night, Sullivan was performing his usual routine in the Hall of Mirrors attraction when something went terribly wrong. Tommy Henderson, the carnival's maintenance supervisor at the time, reported hearing an ungodly scream, followed by the sound of shattering glass at approximately 11:47 p.m. When carnival staff entered the Hall of Mirrors, they found it completely destroyed, with every mirror shattered except one. Sullivan was nowhere to be found, though his distinctive orange wig lay on the floor among the broken glass. The only other evidence was a strange residue on the remaining mirror, which, according to police reports filed by Officer James McCarthy, appeared to shift and move when viewed from different angles. The disappearance of Marty Sullivan remained unsolved, and the carnival continued operating until the spring of 1964, when visitors began reporting strange occurrences. Mary Ellen Cooper, a local schoolteacher, filed the first official report of what would later be known as a Giggles sighting on April 15, 1964. In her sworn statement to local police, Cooper claimed to have heard children's laughter coming from the closed Hall of Mirrors at dusk, despite the attraction being permanently sealed after Sullivan's disappearance. Throughout the summer of 1964, similar reports flooded the Ravenswood Police Department. Detective Robert Wilson, who led the investigation, documented over 30 separate incidents involving unexplained laughter, mysterious orange lights, and glimpses of what witnesses described as a twisted version of Sullivan's clown makeup, appearing in reflective surfaces throughout the carnival grounds. The case took a dramatic turn on September 13, 1964, when 5 local teenagers, Michael Reynolds, 17, Jennifer Hayes, 16, David Cooper, 17, Susan Martinez, 16, and Timothy Brooks, 17, broke into the carnival grounds after hours. Their goal, as later revealed in Jennifer Hayes' diary, was to investigate the growing legends about giggles. According to the official police report filed by Sergeant William Parker, the teenagers were found at 6:23 a.m. the following morning in the sealed Hall of Mirrors. All 5 were discovered in a catatonic state, each bearing identical makeup patterns on their faces that matched Sullivan's signature design. Most disturbing was the fact that the makeup couldn't be removed. Analysis at Ravenswood General Hospital showed it had somehow been permanently embedded into their skin. Dr. Elizabeth Chun, the psychiatrist who treated the teenagers, documented their eventual recovery in her groundbreaking 1966 paper, Mass Hysteria or Supernatural Encounter, the Ravenswood 5 case study. While 4 of the teenagers eventually recovered enough to lead normal lives, Timothy Brooks never spoke again and spent the remainder of his life in Oakwood Psychiatric Facility, where staff reported he would occasionally break into uncontrollable fits of laughter. The Ravenswood Carnival was permanently closed on September 14, 1964, by order of Mayor Franklin Pierce. The grounds were demolished in 1965, though the Hall of Mirrors proved impossible to tear down. 3 separate construction companies refused to complete the work after experiencing what they described as unexplainable equipment malfunctions and disturbing audio phenomena. Today, the Hall of Mirrors still stands, though the rest of the carnival grounds have been reclaimed by nature. The building has become a magnet for paranormal investigators and thrill seekers, despite being officially condemned by the city. Local law enforcement reports an average of 20 trespassing incidents each year, particularly around Halloween. The most recent documented encounter occurred in 2018, when paranormal investigator David Chin captured what he claimed to be audio evidence of children's laughter and a voice saying, "Come play with giggles," during a permitted investigation of the site. While the recording's authenticity remains disputed, it has added another layer to the enduring mystery of Ravenswood's most infamous resident. The legend continues to grow, with annual Halloween tours of the carnival grounds, viewed from a safe distance, drawing thousands of visitors to Ravenswood. Local gift shops do brisk business, selling replicas of Giggles, orange wig, and t-shirts bearing the carnival's original logo. Whether Marty Sullivan's disappearance was the result of a tragic accident or something more sinister remains a matter of heated debate among paranormal researchers and skeptics alike. As for the 5 teenagers from that fateful night in 1964, only Jennifer Hayes has ever spoken publicly about the incident. In a rare 1984 interview with the Ravenswood Gazette, she said only, "Some stories are better left untold. Some laughter should never be heard." As we reflect on both stories, it's clear that the concept of clowns has a profound impact on our psyche. Whether it's the killer clown or the malevolent spirit of Giggles, there's something about these characters that taps into our deepest fears. Clowns have a way of blurring the lines between reality and fantasy, making us question what's real and what's just a product of our imagination. The underlying theme of fear that pervades both stories is a testament to the power of clowns as a symbol of horror. They represent the unknown, the unpredictable, and the uncontrollable. As we try to make sense of our own fears, we're forced to confront the darker aspects of our psyche, and that's where the true horror lies. By now, you're probably wondering which story is true and which one is fiction. The answer is that John Wayne Gacy and his alter ego Pogo the Clown are rooted in reality, while the legend of Giggles is a product of our imagination. However, the fear and anxiety that both stories evoke are very real, and that's what makes them so terrifying. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out our other video on the psychology of fear and why we're drawn to horror stories. And if you have your own clown horror stories or experiences, please share them with us in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going, and maybe, just maybe, we'll uncover the true horror behind the concept of clowns.